I mean, in the world of mountain sports, there is no more iconic of a brand as Black Diamond Equipment. And the reason I say that, it's synonymous with the sports and activities it serves. It's been doing this for 55 years now, going back to Yvon Chouinard and Chouinard Equipment. And the company was created not because somebody wanted to get rich, not because Yvon wanted to have a business. Far from it. What he wanted to do was take his ideas of doing big walls in a single push, using pitons repeatedly to get up a wall, and the gear wasn't there, so he needed to make it. He needed to design it, and there was not a bunch of factories in Asia to go make it for you. If you look at what that company did, Chouinard Equipment, between the late 50s into the 1970s, it was a catalyst to its gear innovations, and it changed the sports of climbing. The company was really always about making a difference on behalf of a community of users through gear innovation. It was a company that was populated by climbers. It was originally Yvon Chouinard, then Tom Frost, Dennis Hennick, kind of a who's who of American climbing. But that little company, through its commitment to the sports, changed the sports. It really took an activity, climbing, that was one big activity, and really created these sub-disciplines of big wall climbing, trad climbing, vertical, waterfall climbing, and that sort of thing. It was a nomadic sport, an activity where you could go live very inexpensively where you wanted, travel around North America, camp where you wanted, how you wanted, and I use that term very liberally, camping. And climbers were really off the radar screen. The population wasn't large enough, the numbers were small enough that you could do what you wanted. Authorities just didn't care. In the late 70s, Yvon started bringing in, he'd done a climbing trip to Great Britain, and he realized that a lot of climbers were wearing rugby shirts and rugby shorts as climbing clothing. It was really heavy duty. He started bringing it in and realized that was a catalyst for him, that there was an opportunity here to make better clothing for climbers, and started making clothing, and within I think about 2 years realized that he needed another label for his clothing, called it Patagonia. In 1981 he split his company up, Chouinard Equipment, into Patagonia Clothing, Chouinard Equipment, and a little mail order retail store called the Great Pacific Iron Works. But what really happened then by the latter part of the 1980s was that climbing, which, as I said, was a nomadic activity in America, really came into conflict with three big forces that were really changing climbing in North America. The revolution in tort law in America, product liability law, that product without the appropriate by 1980s standards, warning language, labeling, instructional information, documentation of quality assurance systems, let alone some kind of independent third-party standard, you could get sued by somebody who had misused that product or claimed it should perform to a higher level. Secondly, the revolution in tort law created for the first time in the history of the sport really, access issues, because land managers, whether they were public land managers for state parks or the federal authorities or private, became very fearful of litigation from people climbing or mountaineering and getting hurt in their property. So that was the second big mega force. And the third one was the explosion in popularity of sport climbing, which is part of the reason the numbers increased so greatly. And with that came the placing of fixed anchors. And this was a new issue for land managers in America on the federal lands, whether they were national parks, forest, or BLM lands. And they moved quickly to ban fixed anchors, which would have been just a horrific obstacle for climbing to continue to be vibrant and growing. So the number of lawsuits that Chouinard Equipment suddenly got hit with, and the explosion in its insurance premiums, it really made the business not financially viable. In addition to that, Yvon was, I think at this point in time, really ambivalent about the direction the climbing was taking, with sticky rubber, chalk, camming devices, bolts. It was very different than climbing in the golden years of when his golden years. So there was an ambivalence about it. And it was at that moment that I had a bit of an epiphany, which was the following, that number one, the forces that were threatening climbing, access, your right to place fixed anchors, these were just some of the big issues, but there were more, and there was no entity, no organization in North America that was really looking after the community of climbers, mountaineers, and off-piste skiers, and that there was a need for a group of people and an organization to come forward and say, we are here to make a difference on behalf of the fellow community of users. We are here to champion the issues and needs of the community. And that really was the catalyst in creating Black Diamond. It was to be a company comprised of members of the community who are committed to making a difference. The idea of being a champion of some of the issues that we are a champion of today and fighting for, that wasn't a premeditated thought back in really 1989, even though much of our activism and approach to business was forged out of the environment of Patagonia and Yvon Chouinard, who he himself has been dynamic in how he thinks about his business. But clearly many of those ideals and values were his. But it's been a steady work in process where we've realized along the way that first we're fighting for access, and then suddenly we have access, but the preservation of these environments are being threatened by unbridled development of oil and gas or coal development in these amazing iconic landscapes. And we began to realize that, as what I shared with you earlier, that part of the overall climbing life is these really inspiring environments we're in. And it was clear to us that in places like Utah, we might not have a Sistine Chapel, or a Michelangelo, but we have Castleton Tower, we have Indian Creek, we have these magnificent, iconic, God-given landscapes. And so our job was not only to make sure that we could climb there, but it was to protect the beauty of these places that were our country's Sistine Chapels. So this work as a conservation organization, as challenging our public officials and how they treat and mistreat and exploit our public lands is a work in process. And where it will go, I don't know, but I will say this, it will only become greater with each passing year. As our resource base grows and we can dedicate more resources and people to this, it will become an increasingly greater or more integral part of what we do and how we do it, because each year becomes even more important because the forces aligning against the natural environment, against maintaining the integrity of these incredible environments. It keeps getting greater and greater, and I think that's the tragedy of modern society, is an unwillingness to acknowledge how our humanity is in part forged from being in these unique places. If we fail to maintain, to protect the integrity of these landscapes that so inspire us, we will no longer be able to build and create inspired cultures and inspired cities. So one is dependent upon the other, and so that's what part of what BD is doing, is to champion that, because this is so integral to the mountain, canyon, crag sport experiences, and it's integral to the vibrancy of the societies and culture that we have here.